Like this, the data is going to be transferred from front-end application to back-end application. Front-end application to back-end application. Now, in order to overcome this problem, now the industry peoples was introduced into the ORM tools. So many ORM tools are there in the market. ORM tools like Hibernate, then next Top Link, JPE, Hibernate, like this different ORM tools are there in the market. Compared to all the ORM tools nowadays, the industry people was used by the Hibernate framework. So Hibernate framework, whenever we are using the Hibernate framework, now we can transferring the data in the form of object format. We can transferring the data in the form of an object format, and we no need to generating the any queries. Framework is take care about the to generating the SQL queries. We are not responsible. Okay, whereas in JDBC you will be responsible to generating the SQL queries. Whereas in ORM we no need to generate the any SQL queries. Now framework is take care about to generating the SQL queries, right? And performance also is going to be increased. How the performance also is increased here? Whenever we are using the whenever we are using the ORM, now we can store all these values in the form of an object. We can store all the values in the form of an object. After storing all the values in the form of an object, now this object at a time we can send from front-end application to back-end application through Spring with ORM. It is not possible through Spring with JDBC. We can send this object at a time from front-end application to back-end application. This object is stored into the at a time in logical database. Then immediately it is going to be shifted to the object logical database to physical database. That means how many cycles are coming and going in logical database to physical database here? Only one cycle is coming and going. In this case, ultimately our application performance is going to be increased. That is the reason, okay, we have to go for ORM tools. Okay, we have to go for ORM tools. Using that ORM tool, and we can implementing the persistency logic. Now, if we want to develop any ORM related application, now what is the minimum requirement? The minimum requirement is we need to develop one POJO class. One POJO class we need to develop. POJO means plain old Java object. Then next, we need to develop the HBM file, Hibernate mapping file. We need to develop the configuration file, CFG file. Then finally, testing purpose, we need to develop the client application. This is the requirement for the Hibernate. If we want to develop one application by using ORM tool, must and should, these files are required. Right? These files are required. What is the purpose of this POJO class? The purpose of this POJO class is to create an object. After creating an object, we can set the values to that object, and finally we can send to that object from front-end application to back-end application. Without object, we cannot store the values and we cannot send the values. If we want an object, must and should, what is required? Class is required. That is the reason every Hibernate application must and should POJO class is required. Then next, coming to the HBM file. What is the purpose of the HBM file? The purpose of the HBM file is if we want to map our values into database. Now, must and should, HBM file is required. Assume that this is my database. This is my database, Oracle database. This database having one table, that is products. Now PID, PName and price. 3 columns are there. After that, this is what? RDBMS. Now I want to store the one object into that database. If we want to store the one object into that database, first of all we have to take the POSO class and we can create an object of POSO class. So this is my object designed by using object oriented programming. Now this object having some values, right? So now what are that values? 1001, Sony, the next product name is 2000. How to set the values inside this object? By using setter methods we can set the values. After setting the values, now we can transferring these values front-end application to back-end application. So now we can't opening the memory and we can't see that how the order is there in our values. Assume that your values are in this order. In this order our values are there. Now we can send these values from front-end application to back-end application. Whenever we are sending these values front-end application to back-end application, assume that the values are stored like this. This is the valid data or invalid data? This is invalid storage. But if we want to store a particular value into particular column, Hibernate framework doesn't know. This object we are sending front-end application to back-end application. Now which value is going to be stored into which column? Hibernate framework doesn't know. We have to inform explicitly to Hibernate framework. Hello Hibernate framework, we can store the 1001 in PID. We can store 2000 in price column. We can store this name inside the P name. We have to inform like that. If we want to inform explicitly like that, between the RDBMS and object oriented programming, we have to design the one mapping file. That mapping file we call them as Hibernate mapping. Hibernate mapping file we need to design. This mapping file responsibility is to store the particular value into particular column. That is the reason we are taking the mapping file. In Hibernate also lot of concept is there, right? So now initially fundamentals is required to integrating them Spring with Hibernate. That is the reason I am going to take these points. Fine. The next CFG file. What is the purpose of this CFG file? The purpose of this CFG file is to getting the connection object. We can use for CFG file, as well as we can configure inside that CFG file mapping file as well as Hibernate properties. 3 things we have to configure inside the CFG file. One is what? Connection properties. Connection properties. Second one is Hibernate properties. Third one is what? Mapping resources. We have to hand over into these 3 things to inside the CFG file. Connection properties we can place, as well as Hibernate properties. What is the purpose of this Hibernate properties? To generating the SQL queries. Who is take care about generating the SQL queries? Hibernate framework. We have to pass the inside this Hibernate properties. Mapping resources means whatever mapping file we are developing, that mapping file also we can hand over into inside the CFG file. That is the purpose of the CFG file. Client application is their testing purpose. We need to develop the client application. This is the just general idea, okay, before entering into the integration, Spring with ORM. Now, if we want to integrating them Spring with ORM, now we are not using the any API provided by the Spring framework. Sorry, Hibernate framework. Spring framework was provided by the separately some API. We have to use that API and we can integrate Spring with ORM. Hibernate is separate. Okay, Hibernate is separate API is there. Okay, that API doesn't used by the Spring developers. Spring framework was going to be providing the some predefined API. We have to use that predefined API, and we can integrate Spring with ORM. Right? Now here, how to integrate this framework? Now just observing here. If we want to integrate Spring with ORM, first of all we have to remembering here two centralized classes. What are the two centralized classes here? Number one, Hibernate template. Hibernate template. Number two, local session factory bin. Local session factory bin. These two classes was available to the in which package? org.springframework. Okay, so now here ORM dot Hibernate dot star package. This is the API given by the Spring but not Hibernate framework. Right? Hibernate template is the predefined class. Local session factory also is the predefined class. Hibernate template class is similar to the JDBC template class in JDBC. Whatever methods was provided by the JDBC template at JDBC level, in the same way, Spring with ORM, Hibernate template was provided by the some of the predefined methods. We can use those methods and we can perform to the database related operations. Now local session factory bin is there. This local session factory bin functionality is, okay, whatever task is done by the Hibernate CFG file, now the same task is done by the in Spring this local session factory bin. That means inside this local session factory bin we can pass the connections, we can pass the Hibernate properties, we can pass the mapping resources. These three things we have to hand overing inside this local session factory bin. Right? Now we will see the here one application based on this explanation. Now I am going to generating here one component. See now here import org dot spring framework dot ORM dot Hibernate dot star package. The next public class my bin. After that here I am taken private Hibernate template HT. Now we can generate the setter method here, public void set HT. Under that Hibernate template HT Now this dot ht is equal to ht. Previously what I am taking here, JDBC template, right? JDBC template. Instead of JDBC template I am taking what here? Hibernate template. Fine. Then next after that here, public void save student. Save student. Now student of, yes. Now hd dot save method. Who is going to be given to this save method? Hibernate template. Hibernate template. See, the single statement is enough or not? Single statement is enough. Okay, then next, public void load students. Load students. Under that, hd dot load all. hd dot load all. Now here I am passing student dot class. Student dot class. This is going to be returns list. This is going to be returns list. Then next, after that, iterator it is equal to l dot iterator. L dot iterator. Then while it dot as next. Then next, student s is equal to student of it dot next method. The next, system dot out dot println s dot get student id. Student id plus s dot get student name. Student name plus s dot get student marks. Then close the while loop, close the method, close the class. Close the class. Right, close the class. See now here, hd dot load all. What is this? I am loading all the records. Yes, there is some concept in Hibernate. That's what I am saying. Hibernate also is most important. See now, in Hibernate, two operations we can perform. Number one, single row operations. Single row operations. Number two, multi-row operations. Multi-row operations. Single row operations, multi-row operations we can perform. If we want to perform single row operations, now we can use what? Save method. We can use what? Update method. We can use what? Delete method. We can use what? Merge method. We can use what? Okay, we can use what? Persist method. We can use what? Load method. The next, get method. Get method. Evic. Like this. Different methods are there. By using these methods, we can perform to the single row operations. This is what? Single row operation. Here, Spring was provided by some API. We can use that API, but internally that API was utilizing the Hibernate framework only. Right? This is the single row operation, but this is what? Multi-row operations. So this is what? This is the criteria. In Hibernate framework, one concept is there, that is criteria. It is not possible to explain at a time within this Spring course. Total Hibernate framework, right? So now here, in multi-row operations, Number 1 is what? HQL, Hibernate query language. Number 2 is what? Criteria. Number 3 is what? Named queries. Named queries. Number 4 is what? Okay, so now named queries and different concepts are there, and one more concept is there here, HQL, criteria and projections. Okay, then next negative SQL, like this. Different concepts are there. By using these concepts we can perform to the multi-row operations. Multi-row means at a time 10 records we can delete. That is multi-row operation. At a time we can select the 100 records. That is multi-row operation. If we want to delete the single row, then we can go for delete method. That is single row operation. That means only one record we can delete at a time. Only one record we can insert at a time. So like this, by using Hibernate framework we can perform to the multi-row operations as well as single row operations. But here I am using the one is the single row operation, one is the multi-row operation. So now internally this Spring framework was going to be utilizing that Hibernate framework, but directly I am not using that Hibernate framework. Spring was provided by the some predefined API. We can use that predefined API and we can implementing the an application. That API internally is going to be utilizing the Hibernate framework. Now fine, now I am designing here component. After designing the component, now we have to configure this component.